Hello everyone, welcome to Pete's CD Vinyl World. Today I wanted to do a response to the Vinyl Tag 2021 that's going around. So there was 20 questions started from Tales from the Crate. So I've seen some other videos out there, people doing them, so I'm just going to do mine now. And a couple of them I have CDs for, but but anyway, let's get started. So the first question was Discovery in 2020. So I took that, the way most people have been responding is a band discovery rather than discovering a rare album or rare pressing of something. So a band I discovered is this band called Shoes. It's sort of a power pop band. Similar to Cheap Trick in a way. This came out in 1979. Had a couple releases on Elektra. I looked up afterwards. I got this in the beginning of the year. It was a flea market that opened up actually a couple weeks before the pandemic started. And it was a dealer there, and he was selling his albums like four for $10. And he had a couple sealed copies of this. And I wish I had gotten the other ones too. But this is really good. I'm trying to find the other ones if I can. And I had heard of them because they actually had opened for Kiss on the Creatures of the Night tour for a few dates. So that's why I had heard the name before, but I had never heard their music. But this is a really good power pop album here. Next album, Quarantine By. So I'm in New Jersey, so I believe retail stores were closed for most of April and May, from what I remember. Retail meaning anyone that didn't sell food or clothing. So Walmart and Target were still open, and I believe I did get an album for my son for his birthday. I think I got a reissue of Queen Night at the Opera, if I'm not mistaken. But at the same time, I was also hitting yard sales, but this is one I did get at a yard sale during the quarantine. It's Doobie Brothers, Captain and Me. Really good album, really good sounding album. I don't have a lot of Doobie Brothers, but this has a lot of their hits on it. Natural Thing's a really good song too, but this is one I had picked up. Again, not a huge fan of them, but I do like a lot of their stuff. So, LP you want to find in 2020. So, for me, I took this as an album you want to find out in a record store or hunting or digging or out in the wild, because anything's obviously available on eBay or Amazon if you really look. But a couple that I would like to find are the first two Badlands albums. Those are even rare to find on CD. Even the CDs are worth like $30. So I'd like to find those. They came out in late 80s, early 90s. But other than that, nothing too crazy. I just like to find stuff I'm interested in, I try not to, like I said, hunt on eBay because everything's available there. Part of the thrill is just finding stuff out in the wild, I guess, for cheap. Box set. I don't have a lot of vinyl box sets in general. So I figured I'd change it around and show a box set that's actually not available on vinyl. And that's Alice Cooper, The Life and Crimes of Alice Cooper. And this is a really great box set. This came out, when did it come out? 99. So this covers his whole career. And it's a really good mix of album tracks and unreleased stuff and rarities. So pretty much, I believe, all of his B-sides and rarities are on here, soundtrack songs. So if you're an Alice fan, this is sort of a must. Like it even has, there was a UK only single called For Britain Only available on a 12-inch single. That's on here. Some stuff from soundtracks, demo stuff. So I think this is out of print now. So if you can get your hands on this, I would definitely recommend it. Concept album. So I went with Alan Parsons' project, Irobot. I don't think it has really much of a storyline, but it's basically a concept about machines and robots taking over in the future. I'm not as high on this album as other people. Some people think this is like the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's a good sounding album. I probably have to listen to it a lot more. I like a lot of the songs on it, but I don't think it's the be all end all to stuff. But cool cover too. Album where an artist changed direction. So there's obviously a lot of options to this. So I figured I'd show one where maybe people weren't, an artist maybe wasn't so obvious. And I went with Frank Zappa. This is Tinseltown Rebellion. To me, this really marks this came out in 81. This really marks the beginning of his, what I call his 80s sound, which encompasses, he usually mostly using electronic drums. Most of his songs almost have like a reggae feel. So by this time, the jazz fusion was completely gone from his sound. Any of the even the harder rock stuff, he's still soloing like that. His guitar tone took on a more processed sound, a lot of chorus, delay, echo, and flanger. So a lot of people, you could say that really started with Joe's Garage, but I think Joe's Garage is a very more organic sounding album, which is definitely the transition between, say, Shake Your Booty and this. To me, this is the real start of the 80s Frank Zappa sound. And he never really went back to that classic 70s sound, in my opinion. But White Label Promo. This is a self-titled Montrose album. And Warner Brothers White Label. Right there. And, it's crazy to think. I'm pretty sure I got this at the Princeton Record Exchange back in the 80s for like probably a few dollars, if that. They probably didn't even like price it as a promo. They just priced it as a whatever. It's crazy to think the stuff you get back in the 90s, for nothing, compilation album. Since we just lost Leslie West, I went with the Best of Mountain here. If you're gonna own one Mountain album, I would say this is the one. It has all their big hits, big songs. If you're just a casual fan, this is definitely a great compilation. And even if you're just a general rock fan, guitar fan, I would say you need to own this album. All the hits are on here. Never in My Life, Nantucket Sleigh Ride, Mississippi Queen, Theme from Imaginary Western. So I think that's an essential compilation. Album that tells a story, which I take as a rock opera, which to me is different than a concept album. Concept album usually has songs loosely based on one concept, but don't really have a storyline. So, so what I chose was the Who's Quadrophenia. It's pretty much my favorite Who album. I think it's the Who and Pete Townsend at their peak as far as songwriting and playing wise. He didn't do too many big, ambitious projects after this. And you could say like it's really his last amazing album, both with the Who and solo. Not that they've been very good Who and Pete Townsend solo albums after this, but this is the last really amazing one. So I chose Quadrophenia. Album that needs a vinyl pressing. So I took this either as an album that never came out on vinyl or one that's not available or needs a reissue. So the first one that was never out on vinyl is the first Brother Kane album. This came out in, I think, 93. So this is like a bluesy hard rock southern band. I would say a little more hard rocking than, say, the Black Rose. Damon Johnson was the singer and guitar player. He went on to play in Alice Cooper eventually, and a revamped version of Thin Lizzy. Really great album. Had some like decent rock radio airplay, but never really hit it big. Sort of caught in the grunge era, but I believe this never came out on vinyl. So not that this doesn't sound great, but, you know, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, this album never came out on vinyl. It needs to be on vinyl. But, you know, if it was released in the 90s, it probably sounds good on CD. And as far as reissues, I would say these two Van Halen albums, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge and Balance, need to be reissued. They were available on vinyl, like, it must have been for a short time when they were first released. I know that you could get some imports of this, but as far as a U.S. release, they're almost impossible to find, and they really even need to do a CD reissue of the Hagar catalog. And also their last one, A Different Kind of Truth, which came out in 2012, I don't think has been available since it first came out, so that album is worth, you know, like $100 or so. Common and Uncommon album. I took this as a common and uncommon album from one artist. So I had to get some Kiss in here, obviously. So for a common album, I'm just going to do Kiss Alive. This is a 70s pressing, but it's not an original Blue Label Casablanca. This is a Filmworks label, which means Casablanca started working in films around 1977, so their labels started to say Casablanca Records and Filmworks. And so this one was pressed sometime between 1977 and 1980. After 1980, Polygram bought Casablanca, so it'll say Polygram somewhere around here. So this is probably the most common pressing of Alive, because the earlier Blue labels are harder to find. And an uncommon Kiss album is this one here. Well, it just looks like Rock and Roll Over, right? But if you notice here, you see the blue teardrops? So this is known as the teardrop edition of Rock and Roll Over, which is, what happened was, this is an RCA Club pressing. And apparently there was some blue ink left when they printed these covers, and it showed up like blue teardrops next to Paul Stanley. So this is exclusive to the RCA Record Club pressing. They're not super rare, but since it's the only pressing of it, they're harder and harder to find. I actually got this at a yard sale for 50 cents a couple years. I couldn't believe it. The vinyl itself is not great, but the cover is actually really good condition. So there's my common and uncommon album. An EP, Iron Maiden, Made in Japan. Great live EP. Has 5 songs on it. Wish they had expanded this, because really great sounding EP here. Iron Maiden has released a lot of 12-inch singles and EPs that have non-album tracks, but I always loved the Diano era, especially them live. And that cover is great. A lot of people wore this t-shirt back in the 80s. A girl group. Didn't have many all-girl groups on vinyl, but I'm going to pick the Bangles here. I think this is their best album. This is their most rocking album. And a lot of people don't even realize that it wasn't just Susanna Hoffs who sang. Vicky Peterson and I forgot the bass player's name. They both sing as well. So kind of like Beatle-esque in that way, where they all sang. But this is a really, really good album, I think. Album cover you love. I picked this classic one, Deep Purple in Rock. Couldn't get any more cooler than that. Especially since most of Deep Purple's other albums are pretty awful. Burn was pretty cool too. But the rest of them were really bad, I think. Album 2 you listen to the most. There's a lot from my childhood, because I didn't have a lot of albums back then, but one of them I would say is 5150 from Van Halen. When this first came out, this was the newest album, Van Halen album came out, that when I started playing guitar, so I listened to this a lot. And also there was a concert VHS at the time called Live Without a Net. I would watch that on a daily basis, so that was probably one of the albums I've listened to the most in my life. Album you had to get an OG copy of, and I guess you could take this a couple ways. Some people just want an original pressing of an album. For me, if there's something specific about an original, maybe it sounds better than any other pressing, or, you know, whatever. But I'm fine with getting either a later pressing or reissue. But I took it as maybe there was only one pressing of it. So one album I had to get an OG copy of, because that's the only pressing of it, was this album called Chelsea. So if you're, again, back to Kiss, if you're a Kiss fan, this was Peter Criss's band. They released one album on Decca before Kiss. Again, I got this at a yard sale last year. I couldn't believe it, for 50 cents. This came out in 1970. And actually, this is the non-promo one, because the promo one is actually the more common version of it, because I don't think anyone bought this. So, yeah, I couldn't believe it. It was a yard sale. Someone had a box of albums, and I'm flipping through it, and this one was backwards, and I see this here from behind, and I'm like, no, it can't be. And I turn it around, I was like, holy shit. And I was almost going to ask the people, because I live in New Jersey, so there could be some sort of... I was like, if they knew one of the band members, or they were related to someone involved in this album, because why would anybody... Because the rest of the albums they had were all common stuff. Like, why would anybody have this, you know? But, you know, I lucked out that way. Last album you purchased. So, the last album I purchased is going to be my reissue. So the last studio album I purchased was the new Blue Oyster Cult, Symbol Remains. This is a great album. I did a review on it in an earlier video if you want to check it out. To me, I would say this is my favorite album of 2020 also, and I would say it's their best album since Fire of Unknown Origin. Has all the elements of Blue Oyster Cult from all eras, so I highly recommend that. An album they didn't get, or they don't, meaning I guess maybe other people or friends of mine probably wouldn't get a lot of stuff I listen to, like jazz fusion or Frank Zappa, but I'm just going to go for an artist who maybe is not known for this type of stuff, and this Daryl Hall Sacred Songs. So this was Daryl Hall's solo album, produced in 1980 by Robert Fripp of King Crimson. It's sort of known as sort of a new wave-ish album, which there are elements of that on there. The album wasn't a hit at the time, but has since become sort of a cult album. And a lot of good songs on here. The album sounds great. Definitely not a lot of that white soul on here, but it's definitely an interesting album, and I like it a lot. So check this out. You can get these pretty cheap too. Punk album. Don't have a lot of punk. I'm more on CD than vinyl, but I found this cheap at a thrift store this year. Let Them Eat Jelly Beans, is compilation from 1982. The first side of this is really good. Black Flag, Bad Brains, Circle Jerks, Subhumans. The second side has more of like bands that have like a Clash, reggae, punkish style, ska. But yeah, this is a fairly valuable album I got for a few dollars at the thrift store. And finally, favorite 2020 reissue. Actually, this is the only reissue I got that was released in 2020. It's Who's Oz and Sods. I haven't even listened to this. This was pretty hard to find when it first came out, and last month when I went to Vintage Vinyl, they had a copy of it. I usually don't get reissues right away. I wait a couple years and whatever. I don't run out usually and try to get everything, but this is a record store day exclusive that I wanted, so I finally found it. So that's it. That's the 20 questions of 2021. Hope everyone had a happy new year, a great holiday. If you like these videos, please subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.